13.2 Contemporary Issues within Sport, Football. There are many issues that surround certain sports, specifically football. Within this PowerPoint, I have picked some key issues that I'll be exploring to highlight the history that is associated with the issue, why the issue is or isn't a problem, and the causes of the issue. In addition, I will look at particular solutions to eventually solve the issue within the sport. The first issue I've chosen to examine is violence. This is because it is prevalent in many aspects of football. Violence can be presented in many ways, physically, verbally, or even written. Aggression is defined by Bull 1990 as any behaviour that is intended to harm another individual by physical or verbal means. However, I will be exploring the different kinds of aggression within football dependent on the circumstance. There are different kinds of aggression that exist. There is hostile aggression, instrumental aggression, or assertion. Firstly, Thatcher and Raham 2010 describe hostile aggression as harmful intent without the desire to achieve a competitive benefit. So, for example, Roy Keane, who was a professional football player for Manchester United, showed hostile aggression in 2001 when he deliberately tackled or basically kicked a player from Man City called Haaland. The player suffered devastating injuries, and Keane did this out of aggression with no competitive benefit. He wanted to harm that player. So Roy Keane experienced hostile aggression in that situation. However, instrumental aggression is when a player wants to hurt the opposition, but that's not the player's main purpose. It's either to stop them from scoring, or, for example, to stop play so the opposition don't get the opportunity to score. So they might want to hurt them, but that's not their main focus. Their main focus is to stop play. Then Thatcher and Raham 2010 state that finally assertion holds focus on completing a competitive goal through harmful means, but there is no intent to harm the player. The culture of football is a contributing factor as to why the game is aggressive. Although this aggression can even present itself to the early years of football, when it was known as mob football. Mob football still exists today, it's just not as popular as it was when it originated in the 15th century. The game is a version of football which is in contrast to our normal football nowadays. It was a free-for-all, there were no teams or rules. The premise of mob football is that the players used to be up against a rival village, and they used to battle it out to get an inflated pigskin ball to the other side of an opposition's town by any means possible. The act of violence wasn't taken seriously. There would be absolutely no punishments. It would be unusual if someone didn't get injured or died. The people that used to play this sport were peasants, the lower class. There was no respect for other people or other people's lands. It was such a violent activity that the authorities at the time managed to ban the sport from being played. In the future, the upper class and private schools developed the rules and regulations of many sports, but also mob football, as they were stereotypically considered classier and more professional, so not barbaric. That's how the rules have developed over the years, and now we have the rules and regulations for football that we play now. In modern days, there is a decrease in violence when it comes to football, as certain rules and having officials on the pitch try and control the match. However, as I mentioned before, the culture of football is full of aggression. For example, players swearing at the ref and others, the fans are aggressive, and there are not many consequences for this. I'll explain these ideas in more detail later, but the point I'm trying to make is that other sports don't accumulate aggression. For instance, rugby, the nature of the sport is aggressive, and in some sense, as they are tackling each other, this can seem aggressive. However, this is classed as assertion, as there is no intent to harm their opposition. They're just following the rules and regulations of the sport. But maybe this is the reason why rugby players don't have built-up anger when various situations and factors happen within the game. This is maybe because the game has a level of catharsis, so the sport lets them release any aggression through a tackle. On the other hand, it has to be said that not everyone follows the rules of rugby, and there are occasions where players display hostile aggression. But generally, the culture of rugby, there is mutual respect for everyone. There are consequences if the players talk back to the ref, so they are sent off or sin binned, and they're very respectful of the ref's decisions, as they call the ref sir. And you see in the crowds that most of the fans sit together, that it's very united, which can't be said the same for football. The fans are very divided in football, but I'll talk about that more later. There are causes that might highlight why violence may occur within football. These causes that I'm about to suggest relate to the athlete, so the player, and what they might experience on the pitch. So a player can experience frustration, so violence can occur through frustration. They might be frustrated with their own performance or a specific player's performance or the opposition, as they might be a rival, or the importance of the game might heighten an athlete's emotions if it's a final or an important event. An example in the men's game where two players had a disagreement and through frustration and therefore led to violence would be Kieran Dyer and Lee Bauer for Newcastle. They are on the same team, but they had a verbal altercation and they started a physical fight with each other. They just got frustrated with each other and then lashed out. So there's physical aggression being displayed due to frustration. Within women's football, the teams seem to be cohesive. There has been no major incident where two teammates have ended up fighting, but there has been occasions when female players have started fights with oppositions. They haven't been majorly reported, but there are occasions of women pulling an opposition's ponytail, and then from my friends' experience as they play football, some women go for a player's ankles or elbows in the back deliberately. So these are just some forms of aggression, physical aggression, that might come from frustration. Like I said, frustration can present itself within an individual. They might be frustrated with their own performance, so they might not physically punch someone or lash out at anyone or verbally abuse anyone. They might show aggression through like slamming a water bottle down on the ground or kicking the bench or something like that. There's been many occasions in the Premier League when players have been subbed off and they don't think they should have, and they've kicked something or just shown some sort of aggression through their own frustration. Another cause why a player might experience aggression is through disagreements or retaliation. So players can have disagreements with officials at some of the decisions they make. Their behaviour at officials isn't normally physical aggression. They attack the rest by verbally being aggressive, by swearing or shouting abuse at them. They do this, obviously, if they don't agree with the ref's opinions. So they use verbal aggression as a form of retaliation. This could be shown through Jamie Vardy's reaction in 2016 to referee Jonathan Moss's decision to give him a yellow card after he apparently dived in a West Ham versus Leicester match. Jamie swore at the ref, therefore showing his aggression through verbal means by not agreeing with the ref's decision, so through retaliation. Also, players can have disagreements and then retaliate because of this. A famous situation where a player retaliated would be Zidane in the 2006 World Cup final when France faced Italy. The Italian player Materazzi said something to Zidane which provoked him, and he ended up headbutting him in the chest, which caused Zidane to get sent off in the World Cup final. And then eventually France lost to Italy on penalties. This was a heightened situation for Zidane, as it was a World Cup final, which may have contributed to the retaliation that was shown. Another cause could be competitiveness or too much passion. If an athlete's arousal levels are too high, this could be a problem, as everyone has an optimum level of arousal that allows them to perform at the best of their ability. However, if they exceed that level, then they become hypervigilant, which means they lose concentration, and the athletes don't really think about the consequences. They just want to relieve how they're feeling, and this might be through aggression. Due to the social learning theory, when behaviour is reinforced, then a person is more likely to display that type of behaviour. Therefore, if a coach influences or encourages hostile aggression of an athlete, then potentially that particular behaviour is going to continue. This especially applies to younger athletes, as they look up to their coaches and respect them and are more likely to copy what they say or do. So this is when there needs to be consequences for the players and the management